Let's try that again.
Cartoon.
We're back, and hopefully you can actually hear us this time. I'm Jules,
And I'm Shay.
and we're trying a live stream. So welcome if you're tuning in.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to be trying some new stuff here on Daily Dose, and so you guys are catching the rough draft version of it.
Nice.
I hear it on here. So yeah, welcome. Obviously tomorrow is a huge day in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to take this as an opportunity to, last minute effort to get some people to vote.
Yes.
So, Shay is full of all the knowledge on the things you should be voting for and why. And so I'll let you just.
Yeah, I'll just jump right in. I do want to preface this by saying we're associated with a few organizations, and these are my opinions at least. And then if Jules agrees, we can assume that those are her opinions as well.
Yes.
But as of this morning, I checked the county clerk's website, which you can all check. They just updated the website, so it's really interactive. You can check voter turnout stats by party, gender, et cetera, as well as registration. But that website showed this, as of this morning, we had 494,000 people registered to vote with about 247,000 turned out. So that's right around half.
And that's in this county?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's for all of El Paso County. It says confidential ballots aren't included in that, so I don't know what qualifies. I thought all ballots were confidential, but I'm not quite sure what qualifies in that case. But that's not a part of this count. So, if you're like me and you're amongst that 247,000 people who have yet to turn in your ballot, we just wanted to take some time and talk about what is important to me and us, and some things that have been really circulating in the community. I think I'll start with the ones that are pretty universally agreeable. So Amendment J on your ballot is freedom to marry. So this language is kind of confusing. So as it currently stands, the Colorado Constitution defines marriage as a union between one man and one woman. Therefore, same-sex marriages would not be recognized under the Colorado Constitution. As such, this amendment would be changing that definition of marriage so that the national protections that we've enjoyed since 2015 are now extended to Colorado. This is really a prevalent conversation as we look at some of the rollbacks with affirmative action and Roe v. Wade. So we just want to make sure that in Colorado, we've already decided that love is love, and we just want to make sure that that's enshrined in our state. Next, we have Amendment 79, which is the right to abortion. This would allow for state employees to be covered. It's not just state employees, but essentially along the same lines, allows for abortion to be enshrined in our state constitution and protect the women's right to choose. And those are two things that we universally agree on. This next one gets a little bit confusing. It's Amendment 80, which is all about school choice. So if you live in Colorado, if you have kids or you have gone to school in Colorado, you're likely aware of the fact that if you are able to get to another school in your community, then you can enroll and get your education at that school. What this would do would allow for, again, it would be putting it into the Colorado Constitution, which in this case seems a little severe, especially when we look at some of the effects of school choice. 95% of Colorado students and children are served by public schools. And what this would allow for is public dollars to be allocated to private schools. And this can be really harmful, especially when we start looking at our rural communities, because most of them don't even have private schools. So essentially, you're just siphoning public dollars to private schools, which we've seen has led to like de facto segregation, lower quality education due to property tax, et cetera, et cetera. So we just want to make sure that public dollars are going to public schools, which are serving the most amount of our kids here in the state. Working our way right on down the list. And this is live, so this is we should be able to answer questions if we can see them. I have it on my phone.
If people have questions, chime in.
Please.
And I also want to plug that, if you need to figure out where to vote, so there's drop boxes. There's also an opportunity to go to a polling booth and submit your ballot that way. And we'll put links in there so that you guys can have access to all of that. You can just plug in your address and it'll show you the closest locations for all of that. So
Yeah, and
Try
I
to make
would
it super easy.
100%. I wouldn't recommend putting your ballot in the mail at this point in time, just
don't.
because you want to make sure it has to be received by 7 p.m. on election day. So I would recommend, using a drop box or heading to a polling center, which you can. That information is available also on the county clerk's website if you're not sure where to go. So moving right along, next we have Proposition KK, which is a firearm tax. I wanted to take a second and talk about this one because it allows for this excess revenue that would be retained from the firearm taxes to be used towards mental health resources, um, as well as like alternatives to law enforcement, which this is something that we as a community have already decided that we wanted. Instead of putting more money towards policing, we want to look at some community alternatives to reacting to crime and crime prevention. Some things that we really, as of right now, our victim support services fell from $56 million to $13.5 million. And there is no ongoing state funding to replace that. So this is a really menial example, but if you get your car stolen, and there's normally a process by which you can apply for funding to be reimbursed. Like if you had to pay for a premium to get for your insurance, and then you had to pay for a rental, there's a process by which you can apply and get those funds remunerated. But with no state funding, that's not a process that a lot of people currently have access to. And that's on the least egregious level. And then when you start looking at more serious crimes. So this is one way to get more funding for that, as well as we know, for young people, suicide is the number one cause of death. So just really using money for mental health access is something that's really close to my heart, as someone who does education and advocacy with young people. Yeah, and that's not one I've seen a lot of people talking about. So I just wanted to take a second and highlight that. Next, we have law enforcement funding with Proposition 130. Similarly, I think that more police doesn't mean a safer community.
We think
that
as a whole entire community.
100%.
People aren't sure.
Yeah. There are a lot of, so if someone is having a mental health crisis due to drug addiction or whatever external environmental factors that they may be facing, and it seems the community at large, don't believe that the police are always the most prepared to react to that situation. It can often elevate the situation into a more aggressive situation when honestly a mental health counselor would go along further in those kinds of situations. And that's something that we've repeatedly let the city know. So this is just, again, they're asking us if we want to give more money to police officers, and I would like to see, and it's quite a bit, it's a large sum of money. It's not a little bit, and it's already a significant portion of our city and state budget. So we want to see that money put towards something else, invest in our schools, invest in healthcare, invest in mental health access, and all of these things are crime prevention.
Yeah, addressing the root cause of the problem instead of trying to, over police communities. And we often have police cars out here, and I'm like, sir, you guys are scaring away my customers.
Right.
So, move it along.
Because it really exacerbates the issue, right? People feel threatened by the police, so then you add more police to deter people from committing crimes when people were actually committing crimes due to lack of access to resources. So it's where in the cycle do we decide that actually getting people the resources that they need is going to cause some change? I think it's just time for us to do something different.
Yes. Let's pave a new path for our communities.
100%. Right along those lines of paving new paths, this one has been a really hot topic in the community, Proposition 131, with jungle primaries and ranked choice voting. I wanted to take some time and express my opinion on this because there's a lot of people that I'm traditionally allied with and have similar thought processes as that we've kind of diverged on this point, which I think is extremely healthy. Our country was founded on civil discourse, and this is a one particular amendment where it's not necessarily a you're right versus you're wrong kind of thing. This is truly a what do you imagine, or what can you imagine the community can become? So what we know is most voters in Colorado Springs and El Paso County are unaffiliated. They're not associated with either party. And when you look at our current electoral system, the most like primaries have a huge role in that they decide ultimately who is going to become the two representatives from our two major parties. And we don't have a two-party system in that there's only two parties exist, but we have a two-party system in that those are really the only two parties that get the support, media coverage, et cetera, to create viable candidates. And this system largely overhaul that. So jungle primary means everyone goes through and everyone can vote in a primary. So currently, if you are a registered Democrat or unaffiliated or registered/unaffiliated, you only get those ballots. And then you can only fill out one. So that's a really small percentage of people that actually, one, participate in primaries, and two, ultimately decide for those large swath of the community who is quality representation. So this essentially removes that process in that everyone has to primary and you get to vote 1 through 4 who you prefer.
Yeah.
And that creates some really interesting possibilities, right? Because then you don't have, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to run because I don't want to vote split, which is a phenomenon where me and Jules have similarly aligned positions, but I might be more popular or I might be more well-known in the community, but Jules has her own followers. So if in a two-party system, if you were going to vote for me because I represent your values, but you decide to vote for Jules instead, you're taking away from the total pool of voters who would be aligned with us, which essentially elevates people who may not represent your values. And the ranked choice voting system largely just away with that because you can have more nuanced conversations. Like, so Jules and I both agree on some things, but there's maybe something that you feel more strongly about that I haven't spoken to. So a voter can say, well, I believe in these two people, so I'll rank them 1 and 2. And then as such, you're not vote splitting. So it does away with that phenomenon. It gets away, or you get rid of this instance where people are like, oh, well, I don't like this candidate, so I'm going to vote against this candidate because, again, it's ranked choice. So you're going to have an automatic runoff. That's why they call it an instant runoff system. So from my point of view, it largely expands the pool of people that are going to be participating and voting. And from my perspective, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
I want to take some time to talk about some of the arguments against it because I just haven't found them to be that compelling. And if you're watching, please in the comments, let me know.
Chime in, let us know.
Yeah, and let me know what you think about this. So it's being largely funded by someone who is extremely wealthy, who has made several attempts at running for a gubernatorial seat, but they've been unsuccessful in that due to the primary system. And because of that, they're trying, so yeah, essentially he's trying to get rid of primaries. And that's been like a main focal point, is that we don't want, it's being funded by a billionaire. So to me, I'm a firm believer that even a broken clock is right twice a day. So even if you and I don't normally align, if you are advancing an agenda that aligns with mine, even though you're not someone that I would traditionally align with, like we all know that politics makes for very strange bedfellows. So I think that if this is something that ultimately gets more people to vote, just because someone is wealthy is pushing it, isn't really like a compelling argument for me against it. What else are some of the main arguments against it? They say that it creates a pay-to-play system, which I also find a really interesting argument in that.
Isn't that what it already is?
It's completely what it already is. As someone who's ran for an office that did not have millions of dollars to do so, 100% the more money you have, the more like signs you can have, the more advertising that you can have. And in a system where voters are inundated with information constantly and have generally a little, like very small amounts of information, that goes a long way. So already, if you have money to have signs and have ads, you're gonna have more name recognition, which lends a lot to people with voting. So
yeah, especially people that aren't actually paying all that much attention. If they've, I've seen a sign around all the time. So
yeah. And that's a logical fallacy, right? You don't recognize that, like, just like saying this is going to become this when that's already this is it's like a fear tactic. Yeah. So, and that's not also an effective argument.
Yeah, we don't do those fear tactics around here.
Yeah. And again, if the system hasn't been working, why not do something different? I just had a conversation not too long ago with someone about the two-party system and how it's not working. And how I believe that in our current system, if you're voting someone to vote third party, you're largely disenfranchising that person due to that vote splitting thing that we talked about earlier. So the pushback that I got was, well, do we really need to believe that one person's envisionment of American society versus the other is correct? It's not about that. It's about the fact that, like, as we've talked about with these amendments and propositions, there's really real things that are on the ballot that have immediate impacts on people's life. And we can't sit in a philosophical space when people's actual lives are at stake. So this is a real step towards dismantling a two-party system. And I challenge the people in my community to do the hard thing, do the scary thing, and turn away from institutions that we've recognized haven't been working. Yeah.
The time is now.
The time is now.
For real.
So I will be voting yes on 131 is the long and
Yes.
short of that. And I invite you to do your own research, and don't just listen to what other people say because they're speaking from their point of view. And the only way you can know if that's representative of yours also is if you do your own research, which I like is my number one thing. Like, vote for what is beneficial to you, because that's the whole point. Yeah.
Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Can't just be throwing out votes for whatever.
100%.
And I know it's challenging because, like, even me myself, I haven't really been like, you talking about a lot of stuff that, you know, I'm honestly like, oh, there's a lot on this ballot this year. It's not just the presidential, you know, election. There's a lot of different issues that impact our community right here in Colorado Springs, right here in our school districts. And I think that's where it's always challenging because, you know, everybody's attention is just focused on the president. And there's actually so many more things. Like, when I saw the ballot, I was like, we got all that to vote on? You probably need at least, I mean, if you really want to do research and, like, pull out your blue book, go through each thing, it's probably going to take a while for you to get through that ballot. So, but don't let that deter you. Like, you got to do it. We got to do it. There's a lot going on in this country, in our state, in our city, in our neighborhoods that we need to show up for. And that's why we wanted to make sure we touched on this today.
And it's super important, right? Like, we know people are going to turn out because of the presidential election, but something I've been actively encouraging people to do is start at the bottom of your ballot, because actually at the bottom of your ballot is where you're going to find the things that are more impactful to you in your daily life. The president really doesn't make laws. It's actually Congress that creates the legislation that your state has to follow. But what a lot of people don't realize is, while those regulations come down from on high, your state legislators get to dictate what the implementation of that actually looks like, and how this money, in your county commissioners, like when they get this federal money and then they allocate it throughout the county, that is really where impact and change happens. So pay attention to your judges, pay attention to your locally pay attention to county commission. All these things at the bottom is where you're going to see the real change in your community versus at the top, which is largely disconnected from you. But if you can, start at the bottom of your ballot and work your way up to the top, because you get, like, the impact is lessened as you go from bottom to the top. That's why I think it's really another reason why it's really interesting that they structure in that way. But we know that a lot of people don't want you to vote, and that's why they tell you that your vote doesn't matter. That's why they tell you that you can't make any change. But we also know that's why they're actively trying to disenfranchise people and keep people from voting. So your vote is your voice. So please exercise it.
Yes. And, you know, not only that, but we have other things happening in our community. So shameless plug, this is the last week to give input for the Southeast Community Plan. So if you haven't already given your input, this is a plan that, you know, city leaders and people like developers, that they'll look at this plan and use it to make decisions on behalf of our community. So whether that is economic development or housing or new opportunities, they're going to look at this plan and decide based off of that. And so if it's not truly reflecting the things that our community wants, that's another thing that you guys need to get through this week, is giving some input on that. And they have made it super easy to go through. You know, it's question after question, which breaks it down. And so, take some time and do that as well. We'll make sure all that's in the in the links, the comments,
Yeah.
whatever.
Doubling down on that, like when the King Supers around here closed, there were tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that no longer had access to healthy food. There's one hospital. Like, these are all things that are directly resulting to our legislators and our city council. So please make your voice be heard. They just built a concert theater, an amphitheater up on the north side of town. It would be great if we could have anything like that down here. Like, we used to have Mr. Biggs, and we
Yeah,
used to have
anything. Any type of
anything,
entertainment, you know?
I don't want to drive 20 minutes across town to go do something fun when there's fun right here at home. Like,
Yes.
or right here in this part of our community too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
please, if you have the time, if you have opinions, take the time and actually voice them in a place that matters. Facebook is great, but this is even better.
Yeah. And then I think we'll close on one final thing since we have your attention. There's also going to be an election in April here in Colorado Springs.
Yes.
So election season, as much as we want it to be over, we got another one coming up really quick. So if you're not in tune with like local elections, I think this is a really good year for y'all to show up, especially because our city council District 4 is going to be on the ballot this year as our council member Avila is terming out. So it's an important one for us in the Southeast community. And I mean, really citywide, we got a lot going on here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. There's resources within the community. My shameless plug, I work with an organization called Citizens Project, and largely we seek to fill these gaps. If you have questions on any of those ballot measures that I just talked through, or if you have any questions about, because we're a 501c3, we don't take positions on candidates, but if you have questions about issues or on the local measures that we didn't get to talk to or speak to today, we have a full ballot measure guide that we have printed for this election cycle, and we do so for every election cycle. So there's help out there, and talk to people.
yeah.
That's the best. We know interpersonal interactions are the best way to get people involved. So go with being community, engaging community. So.
Yeah. And we have the perfect place for you to do that. Thank y'all for tuning in. We'll be back soon.
Yes, this was really great, actually.
Yeah, we had fun. I'm glad you know what you're talking about.
A little bit.